Greetings Captains, I am Yusrael and this is Mind Trap, the 15 to 20 player scenario introduced with Season 7. It takes about 20 minutes to play out and, of the Romulan scenarios, is probably the most efficient in terms of marks per minute. It's not without flaws, and one glaring problem is that there is no briefing timer. All the scenario needs to start is one person checking the dead body in front of the spawn point, so it's quite possible that the action will have started before you finish zoning in. As far as the plot goes, we're back on Hivar, where the Romulans have been dying, not from natural causes like poison or a knife in the back, but from acute hypocapremia. The culprit is the M113 salt vampire from the original series episode The Man Trap. It was responsible for the first crew deaths in Star Trek, and in homage I've broken out the old uniform in, of course, science blue. Oddly, none of the casualties in that episode actually wore red shirts. One wore gold, one was wearing hazard gear, and curiously, two of them were actually Medical Division blue shirts. Oh shit. The first phase of the mission lasts 2.5 minutes and starts immediately upon somebody examining the dead body. During this phase, you have to persuade as many Romulans as you can to go home, lock the doors and wait for the noise to stop, rather than, say, picking up a disruptor and actually being useful. But hey, it's Starfleet, what can I say, we're the professionals, we know best. And after all, if you do arm a Romulan, let's face it, you're always going to be wondering if the disruptor isn't going to be aimed at you. Unfortunately, there is a little catch. Since M113s are psychic and shapeshifters, they have a nasty habit of impersonating people you want to see to lure prey close. So if you see any girlfriends from 27 years ago wandering around, or indeed if any of the Romulans suddenly sit down rather than going home, be somewhere else very, very quickly, because it's a trap. Oh, and if you do see any ex-girlfriends on Hivar, Starfleet Intelligence would like to talk to you about your love life. The other big ability the M113s have is that they can hypnotise a player, lock them into what is essentially an unbreakable crowd control, and then walk up to them and inflict a health drain. There are only two ways to survive this as I've found. The first is to have another player break you out of it by damaging the monster and distracting it. The second is to pop a large hypo midway through the health drain. It won't actually break you out, but it will at least be survivable, rather than certain death. Once the 2.5 minutes are up, you then have 2 minutes in which to fortify the buildings. There are large crates of materials dotted around the map, like that one there, and you can pick up some materials, run them over to the nearest house, and use them for a little bit of improviser DIY. Apparently Starfleet hammers are very, very good. Again, I have no idea why we're not dragooning the Romulans into this, because hey, you know what, many hands make light work, but no, apparently we're Starfleet, we're the heroes, we have to do everything. Oh, and we're KDF, of course. Normally I would imagine such labourers' work would be beneath them, but, well, needs must as Fekla drives. You can see that each building, and there are 4 in each sector of the map, has a health bar. The more you fortify a building, the higher the health bar will go, and the more damage it can take in the next phase. The catch, of course, is that there aren't enough materials to go around, and there isn't enough time to fortify everything, so you're going to have to make a few decisions about what you fortify. Of course, if you're pugging it, then you just fortify everything and defend everything and hope for the best. If you're in a coordinated team, then you might perhaps say, okay, we're going to fortify up the market, and then leave a few less defenders there, because we only have to cover it for a certain amount of time. So, all the buildings are done. On the subject of sectors, the map is split up into one sector for each 5-person group. So you'll notice that we started out in the residential sector. There are also the mining, industrial and market sectors. Each is marked on the minimap by a coloured outline. It would perhaps help if the minimap bothered to include labels as well, but unfortunately such was not done. Phase 3 kicks off after 2 minutes, and you get subterranean disturbances. Translation, it's about to start raining zombies. Now, the hatchlings are pretty weak, as you can see, they're going down nice and quickly. However, there are rather a lot of them, so this is going to have to be dealt with a little bit of subtlety. because let's face it, a hand phaser really wasn't going to cut it in this situation. The other problem is that the larger specimens, the betas and the alphas, can hypnotise a Romulan into coming out of the buildings. The Romulan will walk towards them slowly, in a similar fashion to what happens if a M113 hypnotises a player, and will then get their copper sucked out of them. This isn't Red Dwarf, they won't be using a straw, they'll just leech it out through your skin with their fingertips. Horrible, horrible way to go, even by Star Trek standards. Privately, I'm amazed they got away with that in the 60s. However, there are 4 buildings in each sector. Yes, these are the ones you were reinforcing earlier. And as you can see, the hatchlings are walking up to the buildings and beating on them. Obviously, if the building hits 0 health, all the Romulans in it die. Or more accurately, are used as... Are these technically zombies? No, I don't think they are. They're still living. And you can see on the right there that, well, yeah, dead Romulan. Although I don't know why it's grubbing around in the dirt. Perhaps all the copper collects at the ankles. Who knows? Anyhow, all you have to do is hang on to this phase until the timer hits 0. Unfortunately, we're not doing a very good job of that here. In this phase, really, you need as many area effect weapons as you can get. So, blast assaults, assault miniguns. Let me see, if you're a science kit, then there is the exothermic induction field. Basically set fire to the little sods, particularly if they're close to a building, so here would be ideal. Now, we're going to have to save that Romulan while we're at it. Now, where's the M113 doing it? Up on the hill. So, here we go. Dakka, dakka, dakka. Just try to do as much damage as we can to distract it. Should really have flanked from the beginning. Didn't quite save. Ah, there we go. Fortunately, we got there just in the nick. What I don't think we're going to be able to do is save the building, which is a little awkward. If you're tactical, then your options are basically as many grenades as you can lay your hands on. And engineers, well, you've got orbital blast every so often if you've got a big clump to deal with, but failing that, just pop turrets. Again, for all classes, if you've got the option to bring in adds, for example the Quantum Shadows device, then use it. You need as much help as you can get. Security escort for tacticals. Really, since you've got to hack through as many enemies as you can in as short a period of time as you can, this is all about massive AoE damage. 1 minute 30 on the clock. We are not doing too well. The industrial district's holding out nicely though. 0 of 4 down, but we've lost 2 in the residential district, which is embarrassing, which is actually where I ought to be. How did I wind up on the other side of the map? Because I ran there, of course. Stupid of me. Again, this is the problem with getting distracted, and I've been salt drained. Oh god, the copper. Right. As I said, hypo gets me out of the damage, and the hold wears off. Now, if you don't mind, you're kindly going to die. No, get away from me. You already had 1 meal, you can't have seconds. There we go, I've lost mining 4, that's falling over quite rapidly. Clump there, can I deal with it? Not in time to save the mining district. Blast. Oh well, that's a bust. Made a very bad job of that. So, head over to the next district because there's nothing more we can do here. See if we can help out in the market. 30 seconds on the clock. Well, we're probably going to save some. We lost the entire residential district as well. Made an absolute hash of that. I suppose it could be argued that one strategy for this, if you're not certain of your ability to hold all 4 districts, is to sacrifice 1 district, or even 2, and use the fortification materials right from the start to just say, okay, you know what, we're going to hang on to residential and market. Industrial and mining can just go fend for themselves, which basically means they're going to be M113 chow, but oh well. End of the phase, and all the monsters in play will sit down and go passive. You do have the option now of quickly changing your kit and recovering from any disasters that have struck. However, don't take too long, because the M113s are lying along the path and the Romulans are immediately going to start legging it for the evacuation site. Apparently, having been attacked once by a horde of copper-drinking monsters is enough to make most people decide that, hey, you know what, home wasn't so good after all, even if it was a tumble-down shack. Now, they will attack the civilians along this path, so I'm going to quickly load into medic, because these guys can be healed. Except, of course, I'm not going to do it while we're in red alert, so come on. Quickly hose this down. There we go, wait for the time to run off. So that's fine. Pull up the inventory, switch kits. There we go. If you're science, bring the medical kit along, because the Romulan civilians can be healed in both this and the subsequent phase. And I would go so far as to say that that is absolutely vital to getting most of these through the convoy intact. Because let's face it, this isn't really an organised, orderly rush. This is a peg it for the exit as fast as you can. An excellent flying kick, sir. I commend you upon your agility. Also of interest is that they aren't always referred to as M113s. Apparently they're called Elachi in some of these mob descriptions. Now, I have no idea whether that is a bit of xenobiology, whether this is just the race at getting a proper name rather than a, hey, have the number of the planet we ran into you and supposedly wiped you out on 150 years ago, or whether this is actually the species' proper name. I dare say we'll find out if they ever make a comeback. After all, Cryptic have gone to all the trouble of putting these guys in as assets, so you'd think that they'd try and get multiple uses out of them. Let's face it, they tried to recycle the Hivar assets for this one and did a pretty decent job. Right, so we're at the evacuation point, just waiting for the timer to run down. Industrial District is taking its time getting there. We've got 16 of 22, 19 of 22. Why are they still 0 of 31? Unfortunately, a problem with this phase of the scenario is that once you've committed to a particular path, you don't really have the time to go back and help. Where is everybody? 20 of 22, nobody in sight. Now, has somebody gotten hung up on the path? Wouldn't be the first time. Industrial have got time, of course. Those are clock ticking down until the next phase kicks in. Obviously, at this point, you can see where it's going with the civilians. The more you get into the houses, the more houses you protect, the more you protect along the way. Ah, there we go. 11, 12, 13, 17, 19, etc. They must have just taken longer getting down the path. But the game calculates the number of marks you get at the end based on how many civilians you eventually evacuate out in the shuttles. In order to get them to the shuttles, you have to get them down the path. In order to get them onto the path, you have to get them through the house defense phase. In order to get them into the houses, you have to go and talk them in phase 1. So it all goes a long way, and whoa, ambush, just to keep things interesting. Where are those last 2 civilians? Probably Zombie Chow, but heal him up quickly. I think I managed to heal somebody else by accident. Oh well. Okay, couple more M113s down there. Interesting that they're using the M113 label and the Akani label interchangeably in this mission. I get the impression that they may have decided to name the species but didn't quite do the asset switch along the way. Right, those 2 last stragglers, I think we're going to have to write them off, which is a little bit annoying. I'm not sure whether that's pathing or the game just not counting properly, but definitely an issue. And why am I bothering to look at paperwork at this point? Probably because we've hit a slow bit of the mission, courtesy of what I assume is a bug. Anyway, here are the reinforcements coming back. Might get some mileage out of the exothermic induction field for this one. You never know. Okay, so we've written off those last 2. Again, every monster in play will go passive at the phase switch. Now, for this phase, we're waiting for the shuttles, but of course the M113s know where we are, so they're going to start sending in subterranean entrances, and I just set myself on fire. Oh god, the incompetence, it burns. Here comes the shuttles. Now, rather annoyingly, the shuttles... Yes. What do you think we're doing? The shuttles can only take 3 Romulans at a time. Given that this is an emergency evacuation, you'd think they'd be saying, hang the safety protocols, we'll just dial up the inertial dampers and pack you all in like sardines. And if we have to scrape a bit of Romulan jam off the aft bulkhead after the initial acceleration, well, so be it. However, simple tactic here, this is basically a site defence. All you have to do is kill the subterranean entrances and then wipe out the M113s that spawn. Now, oh yes, you do occasionally get Klingon shuttles as well, just for some variety. I think that relies upon you having a Klingon player at the pickup site, or at least on the map, because generally you tend to get more Starfleet shuttles than you do otherwise. I have no idea who those guys are, but they've taken a liking to me. I can only assume they're jonesing for more medical care later on. However, another Klingon shuttle in, another 3 Romulans. Okay, I will admit that there's a good reason for only being able to fit 3 Romulans in that shuttle, but Type 8s being what they are, you would think it wouldn't be quite so much of an issue. However, such is not the way of the world. 3 passengers maximum emergency protocols be blown. As you can see, it's pretty easy for us at the moment. We're not having too many difficulties holding either site. Again, this is partially because, you know, we lost 2 sites earlier on. We made our job a bit easier. I suspect that if there were only 5 people holding this site, we'd be having a slightly more frantic time of it. Again, Elkani Alpha rather than M113 Alpha. Mysteries, mysteries. I imagine this will become clearer later on. And again, it's worth noting, I suppose, that you could deliberately sacrifice a site to make things easier for yourself later on, because even if you're half doing the job like we are here, you're still going to get a fairly generous mark per minute ratio. So, knock off this entrance very quickly. Obviously, if you leave entrances alive, then you're going to get a continuous stream of M113s to deal with, so it's best not to. Pulse wave assaults, I think, would be a good weapon for this particular phase of the scenario. Good concentrated damage once you get close. Bring in the next Type 8 shuttle. Off we go again. Right. And that's pretty much it for the scenario. This will carry on until you have all the refugees accounted for, be it evacuated or dead. So potentially 10 or 11 waves at each site. Takes a few minutes, but you'll be busy enough under all circumstances to get it done properly, and you don't really notice the time going past. So, summary. I suppose the key thing is that it's still a little rough around the edges. It really needs one of those 30-second beam-in timers at the start to let everybody zone in and get themselves sorted out. And given that this has been standard cryptic design for a couple of seasons now, I'm surprised they didn't do it here as well, because a couple of times, even without patching, I've zoned into this map and it's already been the go home and lock the doors phase. First time that actually happened to me while I was patching, I got in right at the end of phase 2 and was like, huh? What? But such as the perils of the on-demand patcher. If you haven't disabled that in the launcher, ladies and gentlemen, I highly recommend you do so. It will give you an initial patch of a couple of gigabytes on patch day, but at least you don't then have to worry about the game deciding apparently at random that it's going to download things. I managed to miss an entire run of Hive Onslaught on launch day because I didn't do that. Never again. Overall, this is a fairly solid mission that deserves more players than it's actually getting. It needs a few tweaks. Part of that was the fact that it never really got much time on Tribble. I believe Cryptic once remarked that they got about 100 people on Tribble at most, and good luck trying to get all of those into a couple of maps to test a 15 or 20 player scenario. The other problem, of course, is that with the new PvE user interface, it it's impossible to tell how many people are in a queue, so most people who are logging on for a quick blast are hedging their bets, saying, no, I'm not going to wait for another 14 or 19 people to queue up for this, no, I'm just going to go for one of the 5-mans because that's going to get a more reliably short waiting time. You guys talk about bad grammar. And as a result, we have a self-fulfilling prophecy. Outside of peak times, there are very, very few queues for this map, which is a shame because as a map that is a nice nod both to the original series, previous missions in STO, and is one of the better ground scenarios, it has to be said, it really deserves to get more airtime. Frankly, I'm hoping Cryptic will be pushing this map, maybe by running some events as they've been doing for some of the STFs, and generally publicising it, as not least by mentioning the fact that this is probably the best way to get Romulan marks at the moment. However, I have been Yuzril, that has been the Mine Trap scenario, and despite utterly fouling it up, I mean less than 50% survival rate, we got 26 marks. I'll see you next time.